People always think we're attacking NASA, and we're actually NASA enthusiasts when it comes right down to it, right? We're space enthusiasts. We want accountability. We want disclosure. We want to see what's actually there, and we will accept the limitations. We'll support the limitations on what's capable of doing. We don't need to keep researching in and find out, oh, all we're looking at is CGI. If you can't do it, say so. To keep our lovely subscribers, and we do appreciate our subscribers to the channel, I think it's time we told them a tall tale. Rather than just talk about Apollo and all this stuff, we should come up with our own tall tale. The best tall tales are fishing tales, of course. The three of us are going to go fishing. You're going to fly across here, and Robert's going to get a hold of a float plane for us, and he's going to fly us into Great Slave Lake. And we're not just going to do any kind of fishing, we're going after a trophy. Not just a fish that's larger than the world record, we're going after a trophy that's at least 20 pounds heavier than the trophy fish. And of course, we're going to have to make it a media event. We have to do a press release. In the press release, we're going to document all of this information. We're going to have the exact time we get on the plane, the exact time that we land, right down to the minute. We're going to put this in the press release. And then we're going to put a map up of Great Slave Lake. And we're going to have all of the fishing spots that we are going to be going in. And included in the press release, which we're going to give out several weeks before we go, we're going to include the exact time we catch each fish, the exact size and weight of the fish, and the equipment that we caught it on. And of course, Marcus, you're going to catch this world record fish, but we're going to have you catch it at 6:07 Eastern Standard Time. We're going to put that in the press release, that this is when you get this fish on, so that the news can break away from the news. They're going to break away on the news and show you live catching this fish. So we have the exact time you're going to catch the fish, and we're going to put it in the press release so that the media knows what we're up to, the exact detail. And of course, after we do this and have everything mapped out, we're like, that's all going to be in our press release. We are going to go out and we're going to do exactly that. We're going to catch the exact number of fish at the exact number of time, and those fish are going to weigh exactly the same amount. We will include all of our kit, everything, right down to the boat we're using, everything else, the amount of fuel. We'll have all of that in our press kit so people know what we're doing, even what we're eating, where we stop, and everything, right down to the minute, because we want to document this trophy fish that we're going to catch. And of course, the largest muskellunge, there's 2 or 3 out there running 69 pounds 11 ounces. There's another one 70 pounds, and the length of them is just around 80 inches. So we're going to be at least 20 pounds above that and 10 inches longer, and we're going to have the exact length in the press release. But we're going to submit it several weeks before we go, because we want this to be an international media event. We'll get the CBC to document part of it. When we go to live feed, we'll just simply use Robert's walkie-talkie because it's got a 4K video installed in it, right? And it can broadcast right from the lake. We'll include all of that stuff. And that's going to be our fish story. And it's going to be more sensational than anything NASA ever did. Now let's have a look at the Apollo fish story that they told. And I included in there, that's the Apollo 17 press kit, because the devil is in the details. It always is. And as you can see right here, this is the press kit. They launched on December the 7th. They were scheduled to launch on December the 6th, but there was a delay. But they released this Sunday, November 26, 1972. So 2 weeks before, they released the press kit to the media on there. And we just make sure that they have all of this stuff. And then, included in the press kit, just like our fishing story, they include an awful lot of details. They're going to include nice little items like what it looks like out the commander's window.
Of course.
And not only that, they include additional details. They have time from ignition when they landed, the angle and degrees that they're sitting on, the altitude where they landed, and they have a range to the LS. But anyway, they even have the pitch angle that the vehicle is sitting at is 2 degrees off vertical. This is included in the press kit before they left, the exact view out the window. Absolutely amazing that they're able to do that.
And they're obviously doing remote viewing.
And then they also include one, on the left-hand side is the field of view from the commander and the field of view out the window for the lunar module pilot. They also include that.
Oh, that's nice. Very accurate.
And then on top of that, they have the exact time for their activities, for all of the missions. And they already have their payload, they have their duration, they know exactly how long they're going to be on the lunar surface for, and it's already recorded as fact. This is in the press kit. Everybody has to understand this is in the press kit. They know the exact distance that they traversed on the rover. It's already included in here, and samples returned. And returned, of course, is a statement of fact that it's already being done. So they have the exact amount of pounds of payload that they returned. This is in the press kit, 2 weeks before launch. These kind of details simply cannot be there. They even have all of the camera pan angles, everything else are in there for 15, 16, and 17.
When Marcus caught that fish, not only did he catch the largest one, we already knew what was inside of that fish when we cleaned it out.
I like it.
You take any of these little items in here. This is all right down to the minute. The exact hours, where they are located. This shows the exact location where they're setting off the explosive charges from and the exact amount of time in here. Right to the minute. And this is concurrent with what's in the cue cards and what's in the actual transcripts. All of this is done prior to. All of these times in here are already recorded in a press kit. How can you have this much detail in a press kit unless you are trying to sensationalize the event? And that's what we were doing with our little fish story. We're going to sensationalize the event, and we're going to put all of the details in there for the media so that they knew that you're going to catch that fish at 6:07 Eastern Standard Time.
Well, what does the media need to know this for? This is far too detailed for the press. You would expect to give these to engineers, not the press. How is the press going to interpret that type of documentation? Because that's not what they do. They're press, not engineers.
The only difference in this document, I'm coming down here, is that the launch was going to be at 9:53 or something at night, and there was a delay, so they actually launched at 12:33 December the 7th. Everything else in this document, the timelines launch right out. Here's the timeline that they were going to launch at, the night launch at 9:53. They actually launched at 12:33 December the 7th. And that's the only difference from the press kit on there. There was a delay on the launch. However, when you have a delay in the launch, because you have 5 alternate landing sites, you can now no longer land where you say you were going to land. So all of this other documentation where they landed that was pre-done can no longer be. They're going to be on an alternate landing site. Here they have all of the detailed composition of the crust material, volcanic deposits, all of the stuff on this landing site that they no longer could be on because of that delay. And it's already included here in the press kit 2 weeks before launch.
They had to land it there whether they liked it or not.
But then they catch up. All of this stuff here, they still have the estimated time was still in here, right, with their sun angle and everything else. All of that is changed just because of the timeline that they were on there, right, that they changed the launch date on. So even the details on all of this stuff and the timelines they've put in here in orbit. All of the timeline would have to change on that, and it didn't.
It couldn't, because they published it 2 weeks before they actually launched.
Yeah, they'd have to be able to catch up those extra hours to do that. All of this stuff is just the weight of the machine events, the heights that they were changing stuff in. Far too much detail to make any adjustments in travel or anything else. They would have to know, of course, the exact thrust capabilities of these engines at every given time to be able to be this accurate. You see, these numbers are not estimates. They are exact numbers, right down to the pound on each of them. Could not possibly have that. There would be constant adjustments in these numbers as you're traveling, because you don't know exactly how much fuel you're going to lose. You don't know exactly how much. And you just simply go through here. Here's all of their course corrections right down to the minute.
If they had to go to another landing site, all of this would be void. It would be null and void, all of it.
What if you're on course and you don't need to make a course correction?
Well, they'd have to know that, wouldn't they? They'd have to know they're on course.
But it's already here. The course corrections are here. Everything is here.
If they have to land somewhere else, then it's useless. What did they bother to print this for? Because Armstrong didn't land where that computer picked for them to land either.
They're showing here that they're going to do a powered descent from 68 nautical miles. Right there. Not 70, 68. And it shows exactly right here. Everything right down, feet per minute, everything else coming down here. They could only be estimates, but they actually repeated this exactly. And that's the same as us telling a fish story. I'm going to show you a map of Great Slave Lake, and I'm going to show you the exact time and how many fish we caught on each of the fishing sites we attended. And I'm going to give you the exact weight, the time, everything else, and the length of that fish recorded. And that's exactly how to tell a tall tale. There's too many details in here that cannot be here.
And you don't forget, too, that we only have so much fuel for that boat. So that means we're going to have to limit that fuel to the whole day.
Yeah, it's like us saying we took 5 gallons of fuel with us and we're running a 150 horse motor and we're going to travel 100 miles across the lake, right? The motor burns 15 gallons an hour and we brought 5 gallons with us. We're going out for the day. Anyway, here, this is the overhaul time from launch.
Ground elapsed time, it stands for.
Ground elapsed time, yeah. As you can see here, right to the minute. It's not 122 hours and 13 minutes. 122 hours and 27 minutes when they do this. How would they know?
They're guessing.
It's interesting how it doesn't say ETA either.
But it's in the press kit. These details are matching their transcripts. That's what the problem is. All of this stuff here. How did they know that they came back at 66.5 degrees?
And on Apollo 16, they had it planned at 290, and the actual was 265. That's convenient.
But this is the only one that says planned. These are actual.
Yeah, that's true.
And like I said, you get into these things and they're showing that. It doesn't say planned. This is the timeline, and it's actually the timeline that they followed. Their EVA hours, everything else is out there.
So one could say that the press kits were a rough draft of the activities that the press, the world's press, would report on. And because the press all come from the same point, i.e. the press kit, they're all reporting the same thing. So it reinforces itself as being a real event. Whereas in fact it was all a fictional event because it couldn't happen the way that we are being told it did. Because there are so many variables with a rocket launch, a rocket going to the moon, allegedly, and all the activities that allegedly took place on the moon. Because everybody reinforces everybody else's story, because they all got it from the same place, i.e. the press kit, everybody thinks it must be true, because they read it in the newspaper and they've seen it on television. It wasn't true, because what you have done, Scott, is to deconstruct the press kit against the reality of what would occur. And now we know what the reality of what would occur is. It's very different because so many variables are involved which cannot be foreseen in advance. But with the press kit, everything is cut and dried.
They're using the media as a propaganda device.
Exactly. That's
And
what
they gave them the details on which to activate that. Far too many details. This little section here, of course, is exactly the same as the cue cards, the timelines. It's giving it to you in exact minutes. This is 5 minutes through here.
Yep.
52 minutes of sampling. This is for EVA1. And this is what is in the cue cards for the CDR and the LMP. And then it goes through the next section for EVA2. These are the exact timelines that they're going to be out there, right to the minutes. Like you see it, it's 5 minutes, 21 minutes, 16 minutes, and 4 minutes, right? So the overall stay is 45 minutes. You add those up, it's 45 minutes. This section here is 41 minutes. You add those up, it's 41 minutes. Exactly. That's in the cue cards as well. There's absolutely no way this information would need to be in a press kit.
Don't forget, all this stuff was prepared. Look at on CBS on that transmission. Cronkites talking away, and they have all of these beautiful, already pre-made films of the lander coming down and touching down and the whole thing. So that must have been done at least 3-4 months before this even happened. So guess where they're getting all that from? The press kit.
Yeah.
They would have actually had to do the full dress simulations months ahead of time, because this document here would take probably a month or more to prepare. After they've done everything, it has to be exact to what they've already recorded.
Yeah, good point. Well done.
And of course, this one is just unbelievable. And they're showing here, it has a note at the bottom, and it says that the mountains here are 2.5 times scale. So they're not that high. But they show the building each section in, and then there's arrows here and here where you can slide the mountains up and down. If you took each one of these sections as being, say, 600 feet long, you've got 3 sections, so you've got 1,800 feet. You've got about 800 feet wide. And you set these in. You take a look at the Daytona racetrack. It is 2.5 miles around. This particular model here would fit inside half of Lloyd Lake. To build the banks on the Daytona track, because the groundwater is very close to the surface, right? They actually built a lake.
Yeah, right. But does it need a subfloor as well? I didn't know the moon had a subfloor. That has to be the most ridiculous thing I've seen on that little diagram to date. You know what a subfloor is? Yeah, well, you're not going to find that on the moon. You're going to have subsoil, but not a subfloor.
There's the Daytona track, right there. This lake is 3,000 feet long. This lake didn't exist. They had to dig out the dirt here to build the banks around the track. That diagram of the lunar landing site would be approximately the width of this lake and about half the length. That's all it would be. You see the height of these grandstands, they're a kilometer long right there. Just the grandstands going along here. This is without the budget that NASA had to build the Daytona track. They could move these. They're gantry cranes. You put those things on dollies. You could pick one of these sections up. You could frame them up just the same as they do the grandstands. They wouldn't even have to be as heavy a framing, because the grandstands have to hold all of that, the weight of the people up there, right? They could do the mapping on it, set them the sections into place, and you see they are in sections. Yeah. And they have arrows that you can slide them up and down and put them into place. Basically, looking at the photographs, how they blend them in, they just use a stone slinger and throw talus in here. And it says talus is there, and in here and there. See the T where it says talus for T? That's how they put it in. They just shot it in. They put these up. They built their subfloor, set all those in place. And of course, it even has an X where they're going to land on the set. And they have light mantle and dark mantle. All of that's included.
It's basically instructions to the set builders.
Why would it be included in a press kit?
Because that was a mistake they made, and they didn't realize they'd made that mistake.
They wanted to put so much detail in for the media that they included these types of things. And then, of course, they're going to include a so-called lunar mapping of it. and they use exactly the same terminology. They built these two things, and they're not full. This is just on the map, right? They just cut off the section of there that they're going to be filming in, but they're just showing the locations where the sculptured hills and everything else are. But again, they're using subfloor. This includes the scale. Now, their model scale will not be the same dimensions as this scale is, but they're including this detail once again.
Yeah, because that scale is quite large. I mean, what are we talking, 5 kilometers?
Yeah.
It's quite big. It's certainly much different from the diagram they showed where the landing site would...
What they built wasn't nearly as big as what they say they were going to build on, but when they're sitting in with the LEM in between the North and South Massive, it's right there. They claimed that it was 3.5 miles each direction. It was like 7 miles across here. It's like 9-something kilometers, right? Which, if you take that scale, they've done the math on that. So they're sitting into that area. This is where all of their measurements are being based on their travel time with the rover, the length, and everywhere else that they put their map down to where they traveled to. There is another one here. That's the exact layout. I don't know how you'd manage to do that because you have no idea what's on the ground to be able to set it up like that. They're showing all of the stuff as if they had been finalized in the Apollo 17 kit. Far too much detail. This is done for media. If they want to talk about it, I'm sure. Here's the detail of each of the experiments. They're included. This is for the media to discuss, right?
Which is why when we discuss this with people who consider that Apollo was real, what they're really doing is quoting from the press packs.
That's right. The fact that they are inclusive and the transcripts that are now produced with the audio and everything else that they did, there was a hell of a lot of planning to get that all done beforehand. They would have had to do this full simulation well before.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're doing it at Flagstaff, you don't want to be doing it in December. It could snow on you. You'd want to be doing this when the weather's a little cooler. You're going to be in those suits. And of course, September it gets a little rainy, and of course you could end up with a wet flag. But you don't want to be doing it into the December months, like very close to the launch date. But that gives them the time to prepare this press kit. And of course, now when you look at it, all of the press kits were released prior to it with the same kind of detail.
Yeah, all the detail was there.
Apollo 11 didn't have quite the detail. I think they did it ahead of time and got all the photographs done and everything else. But I think some of the transmissions could have been done, say the president's phone call and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Would have been live simulation. I mean, they could be standing in the next building talking to the guy. They wouldn't, Yeah,
they probably were. Interesting point about the Apollo missions themselves. We have Apollo 11, which is the one that everybody talks about, because it's the one that most people recall watching, because it was promoted so heavily. Apollo 12 didn't have any of that. Apollo 12 didn't have any discussions between astronauts, didn't have any of the information, because Al Bean had pointed the camera at the sun, we're told. So there was no television pictures. Apollo 13, well, we all know what happened there. That was a fake mission as well, but there was no landing on the moon. Then they had a big inquiry as to how they managed to get Apollo 13 back and all the rest of it. So by the time we get to Apollo 14, it's about 2 years after Apollo 11. Therefore, everybody has got lost interest, forgotten about it, because I haven't seen any more pictures. Apollo 14 comes along, and we get the golf ball and all the other nonsense that went on there. And then we have the rover for Apollo 15, 16, and 17. So there's a new point of interest. And by that time, they'd got the television sorted. They could show what was going on the lunar surface, allegedly, because they knew how to film it by now. So you got Apollo 11 starting the whole procedure, and wasn't it convenient that they lost all the original films, which is why they look so stupid, and they're sort of prancing about. Then Apollo 12, nothing happened at all, we didn't see anything. Apollo 13, nothing happened at all, we didn't see anything. By the time we get to Apollo 14, they've ironed out a lot of the technical problems.
exactly. But when we tell a fish story, as opposed to a fish story and we include the detail, people don't ask us to do it again because we all know fishing is just a bit of luck as well.
Yeah.
You can't go out and say, I'm going to catch another trophy fish, because that's just luck. Well, what does NASA do? We were lucky. I think our fish story is better than theirs. We don't have to repeat it.
Because we can't repeat it. How many people can now name any of the International Space Station astronauts off the top of your head? Probably none. Because all that was happening was they were being bigged up, and the PR activities were going haywire, because these were men of the new frontier, the frontier of space. So we needed to know who they were so we could identify with them. And then we're told in interminable detail what they did, allegedly, on the moon. So we can admire them for their incredible bravery and their commitment to fulfilling President Kennedy's challenge. Land a man on the moon before the decade is out and return him safely to the Earth. Did that ever happen? I doubt it very much. But we can be shown it happening, and the press kit can detail it in interminable detail as to what they did, where they did it, how they did it, even probably how they felt about it when they were doing it, because it was all written up beforehand.
I had to make sure that the media had the details ahead of time. Like when you read the detail in the press kit, it includes the universities involved and the actual professors involved and the people from NASA involved in making these particular things happen. They could discuss it. They could discuss it in the media, but they actually have the timeline on which these events are occurring, which could not possibly be. What we're showing is they have completed the mission before launch. All of the details of the mission have been included in the press kit and released 2 weeks before launch. And nobody's thinking about this. Nobody's saying, how can you have that detail in there? How do you know what it's going to look like out the window?
If you look at the real times for Apollo 17, though, I wonder how close they would be. I would imagine pretty close, because I remember seeing some of the times for Apollo 11, and I think they were pretty close, weren't they?
I think it was Apollo 12 or something. We had them down within a minute at splashdown.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was one of them.
Yeah, we looked up one that was that close. The cue cards themselves, though, that are also included in the press kit, those times are exact. They're exactly the same as the cue cards are. Not only did they practice with it, that's what they used to do the simulation itself to fake the moon landing. And then they go ahead and include them as a finished deal 2 weeks before launch. That's unbelievable. And people don't catch up to that. You can't say, here we did it. It's like us saying, we caught this trophy fish. And we're going to put it in a press kit. We're going to show you exactly on the lake what time we caught it at and how big it actually was, right down to the ounce and the weight of that fish. And we're going to release it before we catch it.
The storyboard always comes before the movie, or sometimes it'll be worked in with the script. I mean, these things are all running parallel to each other as the movie is being put together. So you have to have a storyboard, or else you don't know where the pieces are going to fall into place when you go to edit it. So, what did these guys do? Make a storyboard. This is a perfect example of it, because again, the press does not need that kind of information. All they need is the times to know when to cut in. That's it. They don't need anything else.
That's a good point. That's the way it works. Storyboards outline what a film will eventually look like. But during the process of shooting a film, you may find that something is better, done a slightly different way. So the storyboard will change to incorporate that. As you say, the script will work along as well. But on Apollo, we had the whole storyboard created. The filming was then done, probably at Cannon Air Force Base, but we don't know that for certain for the final missions. Maybe at Flagstaff as well. It certainly wasn't done on the moon, because they didn't know what the conditions were. They really did not know what the conditions were. How fast would that rover have traveled? Supposing the surface had been so soft that the wheels got bogged down. We don't know that. They didn't know that either. They may think they knew it, so they went ahead with this imaginary story that everybody bought because they had no means of comparison with anything else. So NASA were just given free rein to do what they wanted, to say what they wanted and to illustrate it exactly how they wanted it to be. Feed it all out to the news media, whether it's television broadcast, the Walter Cronkites of this world, the James Burkes of this world. All the television companies that promoted it had a script to read by, so they knew what was going to happen next, and they knew when it was going to happen. Oh, they're going to be landing in 2 minutes. Oh, they've landed. They're going to be 2.5 hours before they get out of the craft. How did they know that? Because it was all in the storyboard. It was all in the script. So if one takes the press packs as aid memoirs for broadcasters and journalists, it makes much more sense. Of course it was all reported in the press. It was a big event at the time. Landing men on the moon was an important event. So all the press dutifully reported it as that because they had the information to hand and they could make it sound interesting and sensational, and there was lots of jeopardy involved, which they all knew was going to happen. But things didn't go too badly wrong. You know, they didn't crash, they didn't lose their lives, because that wasn't in the script. They all got home safely because that was in the script.
At any given time, they could have had equipment problems, and it would have cut everything short.
Well, we've seen it launching the Artemis rocket. I mean, there was 4 delays. 2 because they couldn't get the hydrogen in, and 2 because the weather got a bit bad. So there were delays. So they couldn't produce a press kit saying it was going to be launched at such and such a date, because they didn't know.
Just like any good fishing story, Artemis is no exception. As you can see in the press kit, they have all of the details for you, starting with the launch date, the exact time. It's 1 hour and 47 minutes a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The mission duration is 25 days, 10 hours, and 53 minutes. This is in the press kit. This is released before the launch. People need to understand that. The splashdown date is December 11th, 2022. The return speed, 40,000 kilometers an hour. Even the exact site they're going to land at, the targeted site is the Pacific Ocean. That's pretty grand accuracy there for that one. Total mission is 2.3 million kilometers. And when you come down, they actually show a picture of the launch. It hasn't happened yet. They show it flying in space, obviously an animation. And then you come down, and there are the parachutes, fully deployed. Next picture, there's the ship and the crew and everybody at the capsule. And of course, when you come down farther, they forgot about flying over the poles, so they went right through the Van Allen belts right at the equator. Just beautiful. No mention, of course, of any of the CMAs that were occurring. There's no mention of anything else during the time when it actually happened. But this press kit is released before the launch. People need to understand that. The photographs of the splashdown is already included, and that is one of the greatest fish stories ever told. We tell a pretty good one, but they do it as well, as well, as well, as well, as well.